All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2026 edition of Love Data Week at ICPSR. We're happy to have you join us today for this webinar titled DataLumos, an update on the crowdsourced repository for valuable government data. I'm Erin Meyer, and I'm a Senior Data Project Manager at ICPSR. I'm joined by David Thomas, who is also a Senior Data Project Manager at ICPSR, and he will be helping with facilitating and Q&A. All right. So here is the outline for today's webinar. I'll start with a brief introduction to DataLumos if you're unfamiliar with it. Then I will summarize the work we've done since the beginning of 2025. Next, I'll talk a bit about where we see DataLumos going in the coming months. And I'll conclude with some information about how you can get involved with data rescue if you're interested. Links to the information covered in this webinar will be included with the slides when they are shared with the recording. So to introduce you to DataLumos, I'll start by telling you a bit about self-publishing at ICPSR. A lot of the data sets available at ICPSR are available through our numerous curated data repositories. So we have archives that cover a wide range of topics, education, aging, criminal justice, substance use, etc. And when somebody deposits data to a curated archive, professional curation staff at ICPSR will review all the files, clean them up, create streamlined data files, metadata, and documentation, and then we make them available on the ICPSR site. We also have about a dozen or so repositories that we call self-publishing repositories. Our self-publishing archives use what we call the open ICPSR platform, and there isn't a curation process in this workflow. Instead, depositors are able to publish their data immediately, and the files are shared exactly as they're deposited. So this can help folks get DOIs right away and make available data quickly. DataLumos, the archive that we'll be talking about today, is one of those self-publishing repositories at ICPSR. So how did DataLumos come to be? At the end of 2016, the United States was transitioning between two federal administrations. Changes in administration often lead to shifts in policy priorities, and in this case, they were pretty big ideological differences, particularly regarding science, climate change, healthcare, regulatory policies. And after some remarks in public statements and appointment decisions, there was growing concern that data related to these topics could be altered, suppressed, or altogether eliminated. Scientists and advocates initiated efforts to back up publicly available copies of the data, focusing on these at-risk topics. And ICPSR's response was to launch a new archive focused on preserving at-risk data called DataLumos, and we launched this in February 2017. In its first 4 years of being online, DataLumos received around 100 data deposits. And when I'm talking about deposits submitted or projects published on DataLumos, keep in mind that these could contain a single data set or they could contain a larger collection with decades of waves of data. So this is up to the person who submits the deposit and also the size of the files that are being archived. So around 100 deposits, and then we saw minimal activity in the 2019 to 2024 time period when the concerns about federal data loss were low. So as we all know there was another administration change at the beginning of 2025. Um, Shortly after the start of the second Trump presidency, there were numerous executive orders signed, with some covering topics like sex and gender and DEI and foreign assistance. And very quickly, we saw that federal websites were being taken down to respond to these orders. And it's estimated that more than 8,000 .gov web pages were at some point removed. Now, it's not atypical for websites to change at the beginning of a new presidential administration. What was unprecedented was the scale and the speed of the work. So the number of domains that were disappearing, the amount of content that was changing if they came back online, and the amount of content that was simply no longer available at all. The changes also were not announced, so people tried to visit pages and were given messages about the site no longer being available, like the image on this slide that shows a screenshot from a CDC webpage that had been taken down. The error message says the page you're looking for was not found. And many large-scale national health surveys and resources became unavailable that are relied on every day. So immediately, staff at ICPSR and other organizations and institutions across the country jumped into action to try to limit the loss of information. People were writing APIs to scrape content from federal agency websites before they were taken down. Others were preemptively downloading data and documentation that seemed like it was particularly at risk. At that time, data about vaccines, veterans, hate crimes, climate change, and sexual orientation and gender identity were all seen as high risk. People also hunted down data that had already disappeared using resources like the Wayback Machine to find previous versions of web pages that had hosted the data. And lots of organizations tried to connect with each other who were doing similar things. And so ICPSR is only one of many, many places who care about government data availability and data preservation. And so there were a lot of people who were contributing to this effort in various ways. And among all of this activity, we revived DataLumos. So what have we seen with DataLumos since January of 2025? Due to our prior efforts, DataLumos was already an established archive. It was easy to revive it. And with this surge of concern about government data loss, people quickly started using it to upload their rescued data. The Data Rescue Project is an organization that was formed during this time, and they started using DataLumos as the primary archive for storing data rescued by their volunteers. If you're a regular user of ICPSR sites, you may have noticed that over the course of the last year or so, all of the static pages of our websites have been updated. We've been transitioning all of our sites from Drupal to WordPress and implementing a new design system. And DataLumos was not slated to get updated right away, but when traffic to the site was increasing rapidly, we decided to fast track rolling out the new site. So here is a picture of the updated homepage for DataLumos that was rolled out in February 2025. As time passed, it was clear that the instability of federal data availability would continue, and we needed to start dedicating staff to support the work beyond just lending a hand when we had some extra time. Some of the web pages that were initially removed did come back online, but website content was often edited to become compliant with the executive orders. Similarly, some data was put back up, sometimes only by court order, but often certain variables were removed or the questionnaires or code books were no longer available. So we assigned some staff effort from the project management and user support unit at ICPSR to provide DataLumos user support when it was needed. I am part of that unit, and so I started working as a project manager to help ICPSR keep track of all of our various data rescue initiatives, including the DataLumos archive. Our IT staff also had to provide more frequent site maintenance now that DataLumos was being used again. We couldn't dedicate developer staff to improving functionality on the existing site, which I'll talk a bit more about later. But there was increased load on the site that sometimes required attention from IT. ICPSR project directors were also assigned to data rescue work to help strategize and help identify funding opportunities that could support our work. Over this past year, our work on DataLumos has been supported in a few different ways. So we have received donations from individuals to the DataLumos Fund. We've also received a grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. And we also used revenue from the ICPSR Consortium membership. So if you belong to an institution that's a member of ICPSR, one of the things that that membership fee has supported is the DataLumos archive. All right, so let's look at the deposit activity for DataLumos. This graph here shows the growth of DataLumos since its launch in 2017. The graph shows the initial activity in the first couple of years when the first roughly 100 projects were published, and then we see this flat line in the 2019 to 2024 time period. Starting in 2025, there's a very sharp increase that is still continuing to present day. The total number of published projects in DataLumos is now, I think we're just about to approach the 2,700 published projects. Here's a different view of the same information. This graph focuses on just the activity since January 2025. As you can see in this graph, there hasn't been a period where work has completely stopped with data rescue. The work has been steady, and that's thanks to dedicated groups like the Data Rescue Project who have helped keep the work active. So far, DataLumos has been viewed over 1 million times, and its data has been downloaded nearly 15,000 times. So we are really grateful to everybody who has contributed to the work to find copies of data and get them backed up and preserved. All right. Some of the data that we have tried to back up has been pretty daunting in terms of getting all of the files organized and grabbed and then uploaded into the repository. So throughout 2025, one of the strategies that data rescue groups have used is hosting events called hackathons. At these hackathons, the attendees typically will help create or review metadata, or they will upload rescued files to a repository like DataLumos. And the work that's tackled in these hackathon events has helped us create backups of those large, unwieldy data collections. The hackathons have also been a really great opportunity for people to help contribute to the data rescue efforts without having to commit to something long term. These events are still scheduled periodically, so if you're interested in attending one, keep an eye out for announcements from ICPSR or the Data Rescue Project or other groups like the Research Data Access and Preservation Association, RDAP. If you're interested in hosting a hackathon at your institution, we're happy to help you do so as well. So feel free to reach out. I'm going to highlight just a few of the targeted data rescue initiatives that were successful this year. Some of them were projects that were led by ICPSR, and others were spearheaded by folks in other organizations like the DRP. We could have probably entire webinars about each of these efforts, as well as many of the other ones that I didn't include for today's talk. Um, but I will run through just a few. So the first example I'll share is data from NIOSH. NIOSH is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. It's part of the CDC. After NIOSH staffing was cut drastically, I think it was cut by 90% in May, ICPSR received copies of 116 NIOSH funded studies that were published on data.gov. And thanks to dozens of attendees of a couple of data rescue events, all of these studies have been added to DataLumos and can be accessed there. Next is USAID education data. So USAID's public use data was available through the Data Development Library, the DDL. But unfortunately, the DDL was taken offline in March of 2025. And ICPSR was contacted by the Archive Data First at the University of Cape Town to see if we would be able to help safeguard all of the USAID funded projects from their education unit. We agreed. We decided that DataLumos would be a great spot for these files, and we worked with USAID staff to receive copies of the education data before there were widespread staffing layoffs in the agency. So between the efforts of ICPSR staff, collaborators at Data First, USAID, former USAID staff, all of the public data has been added to DataLumos. This covers around 2,500 files from 109 education projects that were conducted in 43 countries over 20 years. All right. Next is the Highfield Open database. So this database contained nearly 400 public use, national level geospatial data sets that are used extensively for things like community preparedness and resiliency and research. And backup copies of all of this data was collected shortly before Highfield Open was taken offline at the end of September. The folks from the Data Rescue Project spent a couple of months adding each data resource to DataLumos, and they're all available now. Not all of this data is unavailable or was made unavailable when Highfield Open was taken down. But some of it was, and other data sets are now harder to access through the agencies instead of Highfield Open. Okay, and then finally, the Department of Education Data Lab tables. The Data Rescue Project successfully preserved copies of all of the summary tables associated with NCES, the National Center for Education Statistics, all of their surveys, and they cover topics like safety in schools, the state of public and private schooling in the US, and they have long-term longitudinal studies on educational outcomes. These tables were really tricky to scrape, but eventually they were successful, and all of the summary tables are now available in DataLumos, including the scripts that were used for scraping. So in all, it's been a really busy year of safeguarding government data. If you've contributed to any of the data rescue efforts, whether through DataLumos or otherwise, thank you. The breadth and the scale of federal government data is really immense, and it goes beyond just the data products that are provided by the US federal statistical agencies. Here at ICPSR, we focus on social science and political data, and our systems are built for that. And so that's what you'll mostly see in DataLumos. We aren't built to ingest petabytes of weather data from NOAA, though. But there are other organizations who do have the right expertise and technology to safeguard that type of data. So dozens of organizations took on a lot of new work this past year to help respond to these changes in data availability. And I expect that going forward, we'll keep working together to hopefully strengthen this foundation and make it more resilient. So, on that note, let's talk a bit about what we see on the horizon for DataLumos. All right. First, we are going to keep doing what we do well, which is preserving government data and making it available for secondary use. That is really our mission at ICPSR in general and definitely with DataLumos. So we will continue expanding the coverage of data sets that are available in DataLumos. We'll continue engaging with the research community and the public about the importance of government data and data preservation broadly. And we will collaborate with the data community on solutions to strengthen the US data infrastructure and make it more resilient in the long term. We're also expecting some changes on the DataLumos platform. One of the most persistent challenges that we've faced this year on DataLumos has been our platform technology. DataLumos is built on the open ICPSR platform, like I mentioned earlier, and that technology is largely the same as what was launched in 2017. The open ICPSR platform is also more limited in features compared to the platform our curated archives are on. And as the scale of data rescue work has exploded, we have encountered more situations where this technology has limited our ability to conduct data rescue as efficiently as we would like. So this includes things like ingesting data through a batch process or interacting with the archive via API. And other limitations, like the way our metadata is stored, impact our users' ability to find data that's housed in the repository. Okay, so likely the biggest change that we're preparing for with DataLumos is migrating all of the data and the metadata over to modernized infrastructure that has been developed as part of the Research Data Ecosystem Project, RDE. Actually, all of ICPSR's data and metadata will be migrating to this new platform over the next 2 years. And archives that are on the open ICPSR technology are going to be moving first. So I'll share a little more detail in a few minutes, but in general, when this change happens, you'll notice that the interfaces will look different, and under the hood, everything will be working differently as well. In addition to the things that I've already mentioned, there are a bunch of reasons why we're making this change. A big one is that we will be moving ICPSR's self-published and curated repositories onto the same platform. And this will make it easier and less resource intensive to maintain and support our archives. The improvements that come with the RDE platform will also enable us to change things about the DataLumos interface that will help the data be more fair. Since all of the ICPSR repositories will be making this transition, we're phasing the work out over a period of time. And right now, our estimate for when DataLumos will see changes is late 2026. It could be any time in that period. We don't have more specific dates at this point. So what will be different? Earlier, way at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about how all ICPSR static web pages were updated over the last year. When we move our data and metadata to the new platform, we will see changes in our dynamic pages. So our search experience, our deposit form, our study pages will all have a different look and feel. But it's not just a UX update. A lot of the changes on the new platform will be a result of a new metadata schema. Yesterday, Megan Chenoweth and others from our metadata and preservation team gave a really great webinar describing the new metadata schema, and they provided great context and rationale for these changes. The session was called Getting Better All the Time, Metadata Enhancements in the ICPSR Catalog. I am not a metadata expert, so I won't be attempting to describe these changes as well as Megan was able to, but I'll share a few things that I think will be particularly beneficial for DataLumos. If you weren't able to attend the webinar yesterday, I encourage you to check out the recording when it's available on the ICPSR Data Fair and Love Data Week playlist. And there will also be a link to a report that the team wrote up about the migration when the slides become available from this talk. Okay, one benefit that will come with the new platform is some expanded metadata. In general, the more information that's provided with a DataLumos deposit, the better. Our search doesn't look within files that are uploaded, so when you fill out as many fields in the deposit form as possible, it makes it easier for somebody to find the right data in the archive. But due to the nature of DataLumos, the metadata that it's provided tends to be pretty sparse. When there's a lot of data to be rescued, people often stick to the required fields, understandably. And currently those are the title, a summary, and a PI, which in the case of DataLumos is usually the government agency. The original distribution URL is also often filled out, but since it isn't required, projects do get published without it. So one of the changes we'll see on the new platform is that there will be a few more fields that will be required. So time period, geographic coverage, and subject terms. And with this information available for every project, the secondary users and people exploring our site will have a much easier time assessing what's available in each project. And our search filters will be way more effective for helping people narrow down their search results to find the data that they need. Another type of change we'll see is improved metadata quality for certain fields through the use of more structure and consistency. Right now, a lot of fields in the deposit form are free text fields. Free text fields make sense for certain types of information like summaries and titles, but other fields can benefit from leveraging controlled vocabularies and persistent identifiers. Here are a few examples of changes you can expect to see when DataLumos moves to the new platform. So, where possible, the organizations and agencies will be mapped to identifiers from the Research Organization Registry, ROR. Also, our geographic coverage information will be mapped to the GeoNames database, and subject terms will be mapped to the ICPSR subject thesaurus. Okay, so I'll give you an example of how this can make a big difference for DataLumos. I'll use an example from the government agency field. All right, a question I'm often asked about DataLumos is, how many agencies do we have represented in the repository? You would think it would be easy to find the answer since agency is a required field, or PI is a required field, but it's not. Since the field is a string, a free text field, it doesn't enforce a controlled vocabulary or assign a persistent identifier. So if there's any difference in the text, even in capitalization or punctuation, the agency is going to be registered as a unique entry. So the example I'm showing here is of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And in really just a few minutes of looking through the list of government agencies on DataLumos, I found about 10 ways this agency has been filled out in our deposit form. And there may be more too that I didn't see on a quick glance. I don't think any of these 10 entries have misspellings or errors in them, but they aren't grouped together because they have slight variation in how the agency was submitted. So we have uppercase and lowercase letters, period between U and S and not, spelling out United States, putting the USACE acronym at the end. So there are a lot of variations here. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is an organization in the ROR, however, and so it has its own identifier, 05W4E8V21. And so by assigning this identifier to the agency field, we'll be able to see that these all refer to the same agency. And that will significantly aid in providing better filtering options and providing more helpful search results. And also being able to answer the question, how many agencies do we have represented in the repository? So a few repositories have already migrated their data and metadata to the new platform. We will keep adding features as repositories need them in order to migrate. So you might not see all of the features you would expect to see for DataLumos right now. So far, the Journal of Economic History data repository, the PSID Public Data Extract repository, and the National Neighborhood Data Archive have already made this switch. So you can check each of these out if you visit openicpsr.org/openicpsr/repository. You can select the repository you want to take a look at. So you'll see a different search experience. If you were to start a deposit, the deposit form will look different. And the study pages as well are on this new platform. Moving DataLumos to a modernized platform will be a really big change, especially for folks who use the site often. It will be a transition for everybody to get used to the new system, but it is also going to open up a lot of possibilities for us. So we could explore solutions to some of the hurdles we've run into this year with scale, creating projects in batch and writing APIs. We can also explore ways to further expand the metadata at scale or find ways to programmatically pull backups of federal data on a regular basis and integrate them into our system. These are all things that are not possible on our current platform, but could be possible on something more modern. So we hope to make the transition as smooth as possible. And if you have any questions about the migration, you feel free to reach out to us. All right. So if your gears are turning and you're thinking, this data rescue stuff is really cool, I'd love to be a part of it, I have a few ways that you can get involved. So if you have copies of government data that you've used maybe in your own research, you can share that data with DataLumos. We ask that you check to see if the data is already added to the repository before you do so. And all you need to do that is a free researcher passport account with ICPSR. Your account doesn't need to be affiliated with a membership institution. If you're interested in helping improve metadata for projects that are already published on DataLumos, we have an ongoing opportunity that you're welcome to contribute to. In this opportunity, you dig into an already published DataLumos project and let us know of more fields that can be filled out to more fully describe the data. And then ICPSR staff will go into the project on the back end and add that additional detail. If you're interested in helping locate and recover at-risk data sets, you can sign up to be a volunteer with the Data Rescue Project. They're great at sharing new tips on data that may be at risk and helping coordinate volunteers to find backup copies. And this can take as much or as little time as you wish. And they work with people from all sorts of skill levels. And finally, you can also keep an eye out for announcements about hackathons or other data rescue events and attend those. I don't have any specific ones to plug right now, but stay tuned. There are always more. And we can also help you set up a hackathon in your department or your organization. Let us know. Okay, there are a lot of people at ICPSR who have contributed to reviving DataLumos or our involvement with data rescue efforts more broadly. So I'm sure this list is missing some people, but I want to give some specific shout outs. Trent Alexander, Alap Doshi, Libby Hempel, Lynette Holter, Jeanette Jackson, Bella Can, Jen Koski, John Kabale, Maggie Levenstein, Kelly Ogden Schutte, David Thomas, and Alex Toma have each played a role in the work that we do on DataLumos. So thank you to them. If you have questions, you can always get in contact with us at icpsr-data-rescue@umich.edu. And we have, looks like about 15 minutes or so. If folks have questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
oh, sorry. Aaron,
Yes.
we have a question that asks, do you have any idea how soon the API will be launched?
No. I don't. The API is something that can be created once we move to the new platform. Um, so doing the migration is the priority right now. That being said, I know that there's a lot of interest in an API, and so we would love to work with folks outside of ICPSR to start get that ball rolling while we migrate. I can't guarantee that we'll have capacity in our IT staff to implement it, but we're really excited about the possibilities. So I have a non-answer for you with it, other than general support.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll wait maybe a minute or two and see if any more questions come to people's minds. All right. I think we will conclude our webinar then. Thank you so much for tuning in today. The recording of the webinar will be available in ICPSR's Love Data Week playlist. And we invite you to visit ICPSR online as well as DataLumos. Um, and we have the link to the ICPSR Love Data Week playlist on our website. So thank you again for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.